Someone who has access to the Awfulest Hall Protection Magic Circle, has sword skills that can rival combat faculty students, even capable of performing intermediate-level magic. She is the chief maid Alice. Even so, she cannot defeat Taylor, because Taylor is the protagonist. Act 2 Chapter 3, The Final Battle, against the chief maid Alice, while Taylor's group is facing Alice inside the Awfulest Hall. Ed is currently being confronted by maid Sheeni outside, seeing her who openly will not let him pass. Ed thought he was now almost out of mana. He only had enough left to cast basic magic 2 or 3 more times, and maid Sheeni then started her attack. She rushed towards him by positioning her rapier in front. Seeing the attack that was headed towards him, Ed did not feel panic at all, because he was very familiar with how she fight. Sheeni's first attack was a stab that targeted the bottom. Sheeni was then shocked when she saw that he could avoid her attack so easily. Ed already knew the pattern. He then stomped her rapier that was aimed at him to the ground. It was not about how fast his reaction speed was. It was because he had foresight. Sheeni was already feeling anxious at this time. She was then about to grab the secret weapon that she placed on her thigh, but, before she could even grab it, Ed had already parried her hand first, which caused her secret weapon to be thrown away. Sheeni then put an expression of disbelief on her face for the action, but her eyes then suddenly turned purple. It was a privilege given to twin sisters born with the blessing of the stars, ability share, which could be used once a day. The twins could share the skills they could use. It was a low-level telekinesis magic, and the daggers that was originally thrown away, suddenly flew and moved to attack Ed. Ed, who looked unprepared then, could only let his body be pierced by the daggers. Sheeni, who saw it then, smiled happily, but she was then surprised, because there was no pain at all that could be seen on Ed's face when he was stabbed by the daggers. While pulling out the daggers from his body, Ed casually thought, the attack was not very good. The daggers did not stab too deep. He then bent Sheeni's hand, and made her prostrate on the ground. He also kicked her hand that was carrying the rapier, which made the rapier thrown away. After doing all these actions, Ed then casually looked at her and tightened his grip. It didn't even take a minute to reach that point. Sheeni then hysterically said that she couldn't let Miss Alice down after coming this far. She then told Ed to step aside and stay out of her way. Hearing that, Ed just casually said that Alice would lose. Sheeni then got angry hearing that. She asked what he knew about Miss Alice. Did he know how much suffering Alice had gone through, and what fights she had gone through? As Ed had said, Alice might really lose, because right now she was already overwhelmed by Taylor's group. Despite being equipped with the Awfulest Hall Protection Magic Circle, she then vigorously attacked them using the magic circle. Her attack created a very powerful explosion effect. Sheeni then continued, did he know how many orphans Alice had saved? She was one of them. Hearing her question, Ed honestly did not know. The failed swordman of the Sylvania did not explain in depth about Alice's personal situation when Alice was being beaten up by Taylor. Sheeni then said, if it wasn't for her, she wouldn't be able to get a decent job, make money, or even survive. When a huge explosion happened in the building behind them, Sheeni sadly said, without you knowing it, but she didn't seem to be able to finish her words, even though he heard it all. But Ed then said that it was none of his business. His emotions didn't change at all after hearing her story. Sheeni was then furious to hear that and said that she wouldn't forgive him. She couldn't believe that he sided with Lortell. But Sheeni then immediately lost her consciousness right after she said that. As the Awfulest Hall was being devoured by fire, Ed only regretted that he didn't know the storyline of the extras. What did she expect him to do about something that he didn't even know? From the beginning, there are many stories in this world that have never been shown. What is the point of comparing the harm caused by this incident with all the good things Alice did before, if only to find out if she was right or wrong? People who can make philosophical comments and decide their own life choices are those who live a privileged and fulfilling life. But his life choices and ultimate goals have never changed, not once, since he possessed Ed Rothtailor's body, that is to survive. After he defeated Sheeni, a system notification then appeared. He had defeated Sheeni, the maid in charge of the dishes. He had obtained a new skill. He obtained the pain endurance skill, which has the effect of temporarily allowing him to forget about pain and delay vitality consumption. Reading that, Ed was happy to finally get that. Ed then broke the window using a stone throw, then went inside through the window he had broken. Once inside, he then observed the room for a while. The luxurious wooden furniture and various decorations seemed to be arranged as needed. The desk was full of documents and the books were arranged at an angle without a single mistake. Based on that, Ed knew that this was Lortell's room, because it was very suitable for her. After searching for a while, Ed then immediately found the carrier pigeon he was looking for nearby. He then immediately wrote a letter. Elt is in Sylvania. It will take at least 3 days for him to return to headquarters. Sell all the armor you have secured. After writing the letter, he then attached it to the pigeon and flew it. The carrier pigeon, which flew through the rain in the night sky, will return with Elt's head. With a body covered with blood, Ed then hobbled. He also thought this kind of wound should have recovered quickly if he remembered his past experience. If not for the help of Zix and Janica, and some other favorable events, Lortell would have eventually suffered a tremendous failure. But now, the horse-drawn carriage ordered by Lortell must have come out of the Arkan Mountains. Even if Elt had caught the coachman quickly and made him inform the existence of Lortell, at that time, the letter he sent would have reached the headquarters of the Elt store and caused Elt stepping down. If all his plans had gone smoothly, Lortell should have been waiting for him in his cabin, but as Ed was on his way to his cabin, he then met Lortell in the middle of the road. When he saw her, Ed just asked her if you had come all the way here to see me. How kind of you. But then he was shocked, and thought, let's admit what we have to admit. He felt like he was too complacent. With her body facing him, Lortell suddenly pulled out a knife. She was none other than the Golden Daughter, Lortell, in this incident. The 5 people who knew that Lortell was behind the scenes were the 5 people she bribed. If Elt was dethroned, Alice would only depend on Lortell. Sheeni and Kelly would follow Alice. And like last time, she could bribe Will Rain with money. But from Lortell's point of view, Ed Roth Taylor was a variable that could not be bought with money. In a remote place in the forest where no one could see, if she got rid of him, her perfect crime would end in success. The essence of Lortell Ketchum was darkness. She could use and dispose of anyone. She was a true villain. Realizing that, Ed then thought that he had to do his best if he wanted to live, but his body was now completely covered with injuries, and when Lortell had approached him, and was about to thrust the knife, Ed was already filled with worry, but, instead of thrusting the knife into his body, Lortell used it to tear her robe, and bandaged his wound using the torn robe. Lortell was worried when she saw Ed injured like this. Ed was then shocked when he saw that. Lortell then helped Ed to walk, and said that she had lit a bonfire. Since the rain had stopped, she then invited Ed to warm up first. When they were warming up, Ed then asked if everything was going according to plan. Hearing that, Lortell replied of course. She was a little speechless because Ed doubted her. Lortell said that she also got a promise from the coachman. He said he would attract attention and buy as much time as he could, even if it could threaten his life. Ed was then surprised to hear that. He was confused about how Lortell could get the coachman's loyalty to that extent. What she did to him, Ed even thought that Lortell had taken the coachman's family as hostages. Hearing his question, Lortell did not answer immediately and explained, if this plan went smoothly, then she can Bergebung the rank of those highest in power within in the Elt company. Making him indebted to her like this was a great thing. Did he not feel the power flowing through his shoulders? Did he not feel great? But Ed was silent when he heard that. Lortell then could only lament his boring reaction. She then smiled and thanked him. She said that she would never forget this. Hearing that, Ed just told her to make sure to give him the 20 gold coins that she had promised. Lortell replied of course. Besides that, she then said that she wanted to ask him for something. Hearing that, Ed then asked if there was still something to take care of. Was it about Alice? Lortell replied no, it wasn't about that. She would take care of it herself. It was about Janica. Lortell then asked if he was close to Janica. Ed confirmed that she was a good person. With a glum look, Lortell also said that she respected her very much because she was kind and caring, always thinking of others and had a good heart. Ed then confusedly asked why she asked that. Hearing that, Lortell was silent for a moment. She then said that she was not as good as Janica. At the same time, in Ophelis Hall, suddenly, Elt left in a hurry after hearing the report from his subordinates. Apparently, at that time he had lost interest in Ophelis Hall. The arrival of several mercenaries made the situation not easy even for Zix. However, instead of dealing with the mercenaries, he needed to stop his allies. At first, Janica looked a little worried, and at some point, the momentum of the spirits became extremely strong. Zix thought of interrupting it before any casualties occurred. Zix then asked her if something had happened. Was she angry? Hearing that, Janica was silent for a moment. With her psychopathic look, she then replied that she was not angry. the next day, after the Office Hall occupation incident was officially over, his uniform became so messy that it was difficult to attend class. Zix was coming to him to lend him the uniform and also share the news about the situation. Will Rain, who bore the blame for destroying Office Hall. The chief maid Alice, who had been defeated, had not said anything at all, and Lortell, one of the most important characters in this scenario, was preventing Ed from leaving. Since there hasn't been any important reply from outside, it seems that their strategy is slightly successful. They have no choice but to wait for the positive message brought by the carrier pigeon. He has lost a lot of work time due to this incident. His body is also not in the best condition, it feels pain here and there. Ed then opened the life skills details menu. Now that the advanced crafting skill slot is open, getting new techniques that he can get is his top priority at the moment. He has also determined which skills he will get. He plans to start by learning spiritual infusion, which has good compatibility with elementalists, as well as magic engineering, which is great for making daily necessities and other types of combat-related equipment. Spirit infusion is automatically learned once you make a contract with a spirit and make any item that has a spirit formula. Magic engineering will be unlocked when you can disassemble and assemble high-level magic engineering products. He doesn't want to waste spirit slots for unnecessary things, but he felt like it was better to make a contract with a lower spirit now, if he wanted to practice his spiritual infusion. Janica then came and greeted him. Seeing that, Ed then greeted her back. Ed then asked if she didn't attend class. Hearing that, Janica said that her head hurt a lot, and she didn't have any energy left. So she felt that she should rest and breathe fresh air in the forest. Hearing that, Ed then asked if she was hurt from helping him. Janica quickly replied no, of course not. She then suddenly remembered something, and asked how Lortell was doing. Ed replied that she was fine, she was still resting in the cabin. Hearing that, with an annoyed face, Janica then looked towards the cabin that Lortell was living in. Although the Office Hall occupation incident had been resolved, but there were still many things that needed to be done, such as persuading the previous chief maid, Alice, to return, as well as determining the basis of negotiations for the purchase of the Sage's Scroll. But during these 3 days of waiting for an answer from the outstore headquarters, Lortell stayed in this cabin and felt restless. This made her frustrated, but not an unpleasant feeling, because she could be with Ed Roth-Taylor. Her heart beat fast when she was with Ed. His unconditional kindness and trust felt like a soft mattress. For someone whose whole life was on the cold streets like Lortell, this feeling was more precious than gold. She did not want to replace it with anything, especially to Janica Faye Lover. For Janica, whether it is family or friends, unconditional kindness is more than enough. Lortell inwardly thought, if you stay here, you should at least give up on it. If you can't, then all that is left is a dirty fight in the mud. That is her specialty. Staying together for 3 days, a pleasant perfect gain. She would do it in her own way, if she could bury this cabin in gold. But she then immediately denied that thought. She felt that it seemed more like pity. And she was short of money. She also felt that helping his school fees might not be too bad, but she had to look as natural as possible, in a tsundere style. Lortell then thought that it didn't mean she was doing it for Ed, and don't get me wrong, but she then immediately felt that the sentence was very ridiculous. Lortell really didn't know what to do, because she had never been in a relationship before, but Lortell was then surprised when someone suddenly walked into the cabin and asked her to move a little. That was her place. The person turned out to be Lucy, who entered while yawning. Seeing her enter, Lortell then asked what she was doing here. Hearing that, Lucy replied that the sunlight in this place was perfect. Lortell really did not expect this sudden incident, and while Lucy was sleeping in her place, she was then suddenly picked up by Ed, who entered, and immediately put her outside. Ed also apologized for waking her up. Lucy sneaked into the cabin. He had moved her outside now, so she could rest. Hearing that, Lortell was silent for a moment. She then asked if Lucy often came to his cabin. But Ed just said why bother answering, let's just say she was a natural disaster. Lortell then got upset hearing that, but she then immediately calmed herself down. There was still time. She would show their competition for 3 days. The morning of the second day of Lortell's life in Ed's cabin, she started her day by greeting Ed, but not only her, because Janica also came there and said good morning to Ed. Lortell could only resign herself to seeing that, contrary to her expectations, alone time with Ed seemed very difficult to get. She could only sigh at the sight of Lucy sleeping lazily in the cabin. As for Ed himself, after he finished his work, He then sighed with relief. Ed was currently making handmade bricks. After finishing making them, his crafting proficiency then increased. He also learned masonry skills because of that. Ed's reason for making bricks was to build a fireplace in his cabin. The fireplace was delayed due to the Awfulest Hall incident. After Ed finished making the dish, Lortell was then fascinated by the unique smell. She then asked if he added basil leaves. Ed said that Maya shared this with him at that time. He was also surprised that Lortell could tell just from the smell. Hearing that, Lortell then said that she was quite confident in her sense of smell. If nothing happened this morning, it seemed that they could assume that the situation was going according to plan. Ed also confirmed that it was good news, but they could not let their guard down. Lortell also agreed with that. No matter what, there were still many things to do. There were still things she had to do, and she also had to pay accordingly. As a merchant, she had to pay 20 gold coins as she had promised. She also asked if he would accept anything other than cash. Hearing that, Ed then said that the only thing he could think of was probably construction materials, or maybe a backup supply of magic engineering. Lortell was then confused to hear that he needed magic engineering supplies, while Janica herself now felt annoyed at the interaction between the two of them. Lortell then said that she would check the inventory later, and would let him know, but after she thought about it, she also memorized some. Ed then said to Janica that there was something he wanted to ask for help with. Hearing that, Janica then enthusiastically asked what it was. Ed said that he wanted to study magic spirits and try to make a contract with at least lower spirits, so he wondered if she could help him with that. Hearing that, with a proud attitude, Janica then said that then she would be his teacher. She would teach him until he could make a contract with an intermediate spirit. Ed could only be dumbfounded at her attitude, while showing a bird-shaped spirit. She then asked if we should first look at his sensitivity. She asked him if he could see it. She also told the spirit whose name was Karis to try to talk to Ed, but Karis instead said that Ed could not. Hearing that, Ed then said that he could vaguely hear it. Karis then told Janica, to be able to hear them completely, he had to improve his spirit resonance ability. Janica was quite surprised to hear that. But Ed's progress was faster than she expected. Karis then asked her to try to think about Ed's daily routine, how much time he had to practice magic. She also knew that, based on the last weekly report in the Dex Hall, his food supply was running low, and he had to focus on building the cabin, so he couldn't be distracted by other things. But without Karis having time to continue its words, it was first silenced by Janica. While sweating coldly, Janica then asked if he heard it. Ed replied, vaguely, about the weekly report meeting. Janica then panicked hearing that. While Ed could only be silent when he saw her attitude, seeing them who were silent, Lortell then asked if they had finished talking. She continued, so. The conclusion of the conversation regarding the magic engineering supply, it seems that they have more supplies left than expected, so they can provide a lot. Hearing that, Ed then asked if she could sell it at a discount. She could calculate it with the 20 gold coins she promised and take it from there. Hearing him ask for a discount, Lortell then said that he should not say such a thing, because this was not so valuable and was tantamount to a dead asset. She actually had no problem if she gave it for free, but she then immediately thought of a plan, and said that it might be difficult to do, but if he came to the store every 3 days, she felt that they could sell it to him at a discount. They could also drink tea there and chat. Hearing that, Janica then got angry at her, and asked shouldn't she give it to him for free. Ed had helped her a lot this time. Hearing that, Lortell just said that she was a merchant, she had her professional ethics, but Janica just felt that she was lying, it was just made up. Lortell then asked back what she meant by made up, while Ed himself just ate his meal calmly in the middle of their debate. He also felt like this way he could start learning magic engineering and magic spirits, but they then didn't seem to expect it when they saw someone suddenly arrive. That person was Maya. Maya also saw that the situation was not conducive, so she then apologized for visiting suddenly. Maya was now the new chief maid. She then apologized again for bringing unpleasant news. There was a message from the previous chief maid. Lortell was then surprised to hear that. At that time, when Maya was drying clothes, she was suddenly visited by Clara. Clara at that time whispered something to her. She whispered that this was very secret and told her not to be surprised. She also told her not to divulge this to anyone, and she shouldn't even look surprised. Clara then whispered, Janica seems to like Ed. Clara then confirmed it once again, yes, that Ed Rothtailor. Hearing that, Maya couldn't help but think, should she pretend to be surprised so that her reaction would not be disappointing, but she then just said to Clara, you must be worried enough. Clara didn't understand how Janica could fall for a punk like Ed, but it seemed that his reputation was slowly improving. As a friend, she could only support Janica, but that wasn't the point. Lately, Janica had been incessantly mentioning someone's name, namely Lortell Ketchum. She even missed the opening ceremony with Ed, and they both missed class on the first day yesterday. A relationship was basically pulling and pushing. In that perspective, Janica didn't have a chance, and Ed, she really didn't understand that boy. The funny thing was that he ignored all the codes from Janica that were blatant. He was someone who was really insensitive, or maybe he was even someone like a creepy wolf. Hearing that, Maya said, instead of being insensitive or wolf-like, maybe he was just not interested in romance. But Clara immediately denied her guess. She was sure Ed must be happy with his luck with women. Just thinking about it gave her goosebumps. Hearing her words, Maya then pondered for a moment. Someone who was like a clever cat in front of a fish shop, someone who was like a trembling kitten in front of a tiger, and someone who was like an ordinary cat. Looking at Belle Maya, who suddenly groaned in pain while holding her head, Ed then asked what was the matter. Hearing that, Maya then apologized. It was just that seeing them here made her head dizzy. Lortell then suddenly asked her if she had a message. Maya replied yes, there was a message for her, from the former chief maid, Alice. The smoldering campfire chased away the darkness brought by the night. Janica had gone home. Maya had also returned while carrying Lucy, seeing the position of Lortell, who was hiding. Revealing her location to the Ophelis Hall caretaker would cause problems. Seeing Ed wearing his uniform, Lortell then asked if his uniform didn't look a bit dull after being repaired. Ed didn't really mind it, because it was still worth wearing. The carrier pigeon they had sent finally came with news of victory. The letter carried by the carrier pigeon reads, the company head's restriction review has been completed. The Elt influence is almost gone, the change of power is definitely done. The direction of the tide is changing, a status report is needed. After reading the letter, Ed just thought it was time to get ready to go back to school as usual. If things went this far, Lortell was sure her father must be making a last stand at the company headquarters. It was a useless effort, but it made him have no time to think about anything here in Sylvania. Hearing that, Ed then asked what the chances were that Elt had one more trick up his sleeve. Lortell didn't deny it. That man was as clever as she was. So the chances weren't zero, but she had the support of the company's next chairman, Slog, so she could trust him. The biggest worry, Alice, seemed to be no longer a problem now. Hearing that, Ed then asked if Alice would not divulge the fact that she was the mastermind. Lortell was sure she would not do that. It was all she could do. It was like a form of payment. She would definitely side with whoever she thought would win between her and Elt. There was a sheet delivered by Belle Maya. The sheet was full of a list of sponsored orphanages, their annual management fees, and the details of their sponsors. Alice's workload was endless, but her health was deteriorating while the academy pretended not to notice. Over time, she would no longer be able to work, then she could not manage the orphanage, so she was at stake for the rest of her life. Because of her inexpressive and flat nature, no one seemed to realize the miserable condition she was in. Those who followed the merchant code seemed to understand her condition and psychology a little. Her victory was already assured, so she was on her side, but rebuilding the trust that had been lost was difficult, so she sent this, as a form that she was not a threat. Hearing that, Ed knew that in the merchant world, there was no such thing as sympathy. Lortell suddenly became silent while looking glum. Making such a mistake was stupid. She knew that more than anyone else, her position was favored simply because she was the mastermind behind this situation. But she then just said to go with the flow. There was no such thing as eternal enemies or allies. He actually looked relieved. Lortell then said that she would be leaving in a while. She also asked if she would stop by the branch office to sign the contract next Sunday. Ed confirmed that, and when Lortell was about to leave, Ed then handed the torch that had been lit to Lortell. But he was then confused because Lortell did not immediately accept it. Ed asked what she was thinking so loudly, but Lortell only replied that no, it was just that, he was taller than she thought. Ed was then confused to hear her suddenly talk about it. While blushing, Lortell then said that she also felt that this was a bit rash, but chasing without daring to do something rash was a bit difficult. Ed then could only be confused to hear that. Lortell then told Ed, human relationships were basically pulling and pushing, like this tie, which he could see. It was tied, seeing Lortell, who was so close, and suddenly straightened his tie. Ed then asked her that no one was looking, why did his clothes bother her. Hearing that, Lortell only said that always maintaining a good posture was not a bad thing. They were students of the Sylvania Academy, while Ed himself was still confused about what he was talking about, but he was then surprised when Lortell suddenly pulled his body. While standing on tiptoe, Lortell then kissed him, under the sparkling light of the stars in the sky. The scene was very romantic, until finally Lortell then let go of the kiss. While blushing, she then said that the berries they ate for last night were very delicious. Tasting it again was good. Hearing that, Ed then told her not to cross the line. Lortell then said that she was sad to hear that. She also said that if he only liked pushing, he wouldn't be popular. Next time, he should pull a little. She also thought she should practice pushing too. After saying that, Lortell then left, and when she was within a certain distance, Lortell suddenly ran fast and immediately moved away from there. Ed could only be silent to see that, even though he tried to avoid being seen with the main scenario characters, but, as usual, things in this world never go according to plan. Ed also blushed after Lortell suddenly kissed him. The stars in the sky visible from the forest are still beautiful, and the moon is shining brightly. The chirping of the cicadas continues, and the crackling of the campfire is always the same, but he feels that the plot of the scenario he is following is constantly changing. Regardless of his will, he feels that his alienated self is now sucked into the center of the story. His plan to watch the scenario end smoothly from the side, and the plan to take care of his own interests has never changed, living without ambition. He just needs to graduate and pursue that eligibility, but only then did he realize how reckless and challenging this seemingly easy determination was. Not long after that, after the summer passed, autumn finally arrived. The leaves fell to the ground as a symbol of the season. Somewhere, there was Janica, who was taking shelter under a tree while listening to the routine report from the spirits. The spirit reported that Ed and that red fox were kissing. It also said that she couldn't just stand by if she didn't do something, but before the spirit could finish its words, Janica had already interrupted it, because she was so shocked by what it said. The fire spirit said that it saw it too. The scene was really tense. Youth is really full of fire, that kind of woman, always playing with people's feelings. Janica was confused by what it was talking about and asked how Ed reacted. The fire spirit then told her that when it saw that time, he was clearly trying to limit the distance between them. He couldn't even react at all when suddenly kissed, but his expression didn't even change a bit. Seeing that, it couldn't help but admire him. The way he responded so coldly even made it shrink a little. There were two possibilities. He didn't think the fallen noble girl was worthy of him, or Ed didn't even look at her as a woman. Hearing that, Janica then sighed with relief. She was grateful. The spirit then continued, but regardless, men are generally weaker in defense than in offense. Its experience said, the more that kind of spirited person was pushed, the more he would stick and melt. This was definitely bad news for her. Janica knew that, but even so, Ed would be dissatisfied. The fire spirit then tried to convince her again. Was she going to let the fox snatch Ed? Wasn't she going to teach Ed spirit magic? She couldn't waste an opportunity like this. She had to kiss him too when they were alone. Seeing the fire spirit, who looked very insistent, the other spirits then immediately dragged it away from there. A blue spirit then told her not to listen to Tarkan. She was most charming when she was being herself. The fire spirit also agreed with that. Acting innocent or refreshing heart is also good. The blue spirit continued. She must have also thought of the situation she wanted to experience with Ed. Janica then blushed after her secret was revealed, but she did not deny it, and said that she always thought of the situation when she and Ed fed each other. The spirits were speechless after hearing that, while Janica was fantasizing about being fed by Ed. At this time Ed was feeding Lucy, but instead of being like a lover, Ed was feeding her like a child, and when Lucy swallowed what she had been fed, her face suddenly turned pale, and she then immediately spit it out because of the horrible taste. Seeing that, Ed then noted, it is indeed difficult to create the right taste without a variety of spices. Lucy then complained and told him not to use her as a taste-testing machine, but Ed just ignored her complaints. He also thought, maybe he should postpone his cooking skill training until he had more diverse ingredients. After so long living in the forest, his life skill level has now reached the intermediate level. Core attributes such as dexterity are greatly affected by the level of life skill proficiency. The problem is that he is too busy. Now that school has started, He is out of school activities, the only time he has to focus on survival activities. Even if he reduces his sleeping hours, there are only about 5 or 6 hours, he is getting used to it. But he needs to think more about the efficiency of his survival activities. In addition, he has to keep an eye on whether the scenario is going smoothly. He keeps a good eye on the main characters in the academy, especially Taylor and the 4 heroines. Taylor is a combat faculty student, so he can't see his face often. But it seems that he is progressing well. His companion, Isla, was still a strong supporter of Taylor. She seemed to be doing her job well. Princess Phineas seemed to be living without having any major problems, but it was almost time to be wary of her dispute with Lortell. Clarice would only be attending school next year, so there was no need to worry about her. The golden daughter, Lortell, seemed to be walking on thin ice. She wasn't sure what changes would occur with the rapid fall of Elt, but regardless of Elt, there was no change to the plan of stealing the sage's scroll. Right now, he needed more time, because soon he had to check up to the faculty building. Inside the building that Ed was staring at, there was someone who was estimating about the Ophilus Hall incident. That person suspected that there was someone behind the Ophilus Hall possession incident. That person was the final boss of Act 2, Professor Glast.